Hi, my name is Pete Scazzero. I want to welcome you today to the Emotionally Healthy Leader podcast. I'm Pete.
I'm Geri.
We're so glad you're here today. Our theme is the kind of fighting every church needs. The kind of fighting every church needs. What a great title. And if any day and age the church needs it, it is today. And so there's lots of dirty fighting that goes on in churches and in families and in neighborhoods and on teams.
Workplaces.
So it's inside the church as well as outside the church. And Geri, why don't we just list some of the dirty fighting that goes on? Because we have a dirty fighting list in the workbook. I started making a list beyond what's even there in the workbook. You know, the kind of dirty fighting that goes on inside and outside the church that we all do. Things like lying, passive-aggressive behavior,
sarcasm.
I have that one listed. Threatening,
yelling,
hitting in some cases,
silent treatment.
Yeah, placating, giving in when one doesn't really want to give in. Using words like always or you never.
Hitting,
denying, stonewalling, avoiding. What else? Did we mention silent treatment?
Yeah, I did.
Contempt. The list goes on. And in fact, one of the exercises we have people do in the relationships course is go back on what their family of origin did and what they've done.
I thought of the modern day one.
What's that?
They didn't make ghosting.
That's good. That's very good. Good. And so, and of course, we have in the midst, at least here in the United States, I know this applies to many other places around the world, a lot of political division going on inside of our churches and lots of issues where people are divided in churches and don't know how to have a healthy renegotiation or clean fight over these kinds of things. So this skill is super important.
Why didn't we make this skill number one?
Why didn't we, Geri? No, we didn't, because this skill, which is the finale of the Emotionally Healthy Relationships course, is because it does build on the other ones.
Right. And people often have asked us, can't we just start with this? Because justifiably so, you know, if you're in tension or conflict in a relationship, then, you know, you want to do whatever you want to get to it. Yeah. How do I fix this? And
pastors ask us that all the time. Just give me that one skill. The other ones, I don't really need the whole course. Just jump to clean fighting.
Right. But here's the thing. This skill builds on the 7 that went before it. So in other words, you have to, you know, be able to check out assumptions, stop mind reading, clarify expectations. You have to be able to know what's going on inside of you. So explore the iceberg and the ladder of integrity.
Clarify your values, etc. So they'll see that in a minute. So you can still benefit from today. If you haven't heard the other podcasts or haven't done the rest of the course, you're going to get a lot out of today about the kind of fighting you need to learn and every church needs. But hopefully, again, we're praying and hoping as we conclude this series around the emotionally healthy relationships material that you're going to be so motivated that you're going to go and get that course and you're going to do it with some, you know, your team and do it with your church and do it with your family. And you'll integrate these skills into your everyday life, ministry, community, church. And it's life-changing. So Geri, let's do the same flow as we've done with the other podcasts. Let's talk about our story. And then let's talk about the skill briefly. We'll model it. And then we'll make some critical leadership applications of how this works out as leaders, okay, in communities and churches. So let's begin with our first 17 years as Christians, how we dealt with the issue of conflicts, both, you know, personally, maritally, family, friends, and of course, leadership.
Right. I had a hybrid style, which I learned in my family growing up. And I think I might have mentioned this before, but my father's side of the family did silent treatment and cutoffs. My mother's side of the family did yelling, or leaking. You know, when you're mad at somebody, you're passive aggressive, whatever. So I came into Christianity. I mean, in terms of my seriously following of Christ, and marriage, pretty much doing this. I had a hybrid. So if I was upset with Pete, I would be passive aggressive, slamming, you know, I might show you I was mad and I'd be shut that door a little harder or that cabinet a little harder, or sarcasm or silent treatment.
It's funny. We were leaders for many years in the church. We first got married. And I remember one of our first conflicts. I don't know if you remember this. I'm running after you trying to resolve it, and you just closed the door and hid behind the door and didn't want to talk to me. And I was like, well, what happened? And again, we're leaders in the church at this point, but we have no ability to resolve differences between us.
I don't remember it, but I'm sure it happened. But if I was upset with somebody at church, if I had conflicted feelings towards somebody at church, then I would avoid them.
Yeah. And so the way I dealt with conflict, my first 17 years as a Christian, again, came out of my family of origin, because I'd never gotten discipled in how to do conflict or negotiate differences. And so in my family, my mother was a yeller, screamer, and always angry and in conflict with everybody. And my father was passive. He was very passive, very appeasing my mom, making her happy. That was the mode. Now, he would get to a point, he'd explode, and then that was it. But I was around so much conflict and anger growing up that I avoided it at all costs. And I would just take the blame because I wanted peace. I wanted it to be a false peace, but I wanted to be everyone happy. And so, so I was just like, I was a perfect pastor. I took the blame for everything. And my goal was to make everybody happy. And let's not have too much tension here going on.
Yeah. And we didn't have this as an official way of dirty fighting, but it's really sweeping. The vast majority of people probably sweep it under the rug, as we call it.
Christian nice. We were Christian nice, and
not truthful, but Christian nice.
Absolutely. And so again, our church reflected that in the early years. So there was lots of conflicts that never got resolved, which I think is probably the dominant way churches function. There's consistent, regular conflict that's constantly getting recycled, never really gets resolved. That's why the kind of fighting we're talking about today, every church desperately needs. So, honey, what was the turning point for us when we actually began to make the turn? We got on this journey of EH discipleship, but let's just talk about the early, even before we developed the formal skill we're going to talk about today, how we began to make the shift. It was hard. It was really hard for us in the beginning to do conflict between us, but we began to make some headway, and then began
after learning incarnational listening.
As we got in this emotionally healthy discipleship journey, and then beginning to address differences and conflicts in our community that we were leading at New Life Fellowship Church. That was like gigantic. Not lying anymore, being honest, being thoughtful about conversation. So I'll go first. You can think about it. I know for me, I was so avoidant of conflict and always taking the blame. It was a radical shift to begin to value, number one, honesty, and to begin to think through what was I feeling, what value was being violated, and then actually approaching people with whom I had differences. My body would go into all these convulsions because I'd never done it before. I was violating my family of origin. I was going against my genogram. I was going against grandpa in my bones, hundreds of years of history. In the beginning, it was hard. I would have to journal. I would write out what I was going to say because I would freeze in the moment of seeing a person upset or I would feel so bad for them that I didn't want them to feel bad, that I would start, it's okay, it's fine. And I would actually fix them and never resolve the problem initially. So I took it was really challenging, but I began to make progress, and I began to see fruit in our leadership teams and our church. And it was unbelievable. But my initial steps into it in the early couple of years, I would have bodily reactions about going into conflict. And then it became like, I began to get some revelation, which we'll talk about later in leadership applications, that, this is core to leadership. This is what it means to mentor people. This is what it means to be a pastor. Pastoring and conflicts didn't go together.
It's what it means to be a human being. You cannot, just by nature of being human, there must be conflict. There must, because no two human beings are alike.
Wow.
And so we're going to have differences are inherent to being human. And so in reality, we call it a clean fight, but it's really not a fight. It's a skill to help you navigate your differences. And that's what we call when we can't navigate differences, we're in conflict. But so that's what this tool is really about, navigating differences, which once I learned that, conflict is inherent to being human, and that's so when a conflict comes up, it's not a thing to be afraid of, to feel threatened by. Something is rising in me that needs to be declared because we're different.
Yeah.
And so how do we navigate our differences in a respectful way? And that's why, again, the previous skills are necessary to even get to this point.
What's important for you to know before we go any further here is that we didn't just like turn a key and we were great at doing conflict. We grew in the early couple of years where this became second nature to us. And we began to, I can enter into differences or negotiations with people. I had two recently with a board member and another person in leadership. My body does not have convulsions any longer. I feel healthy. It's a matter of integrity. And they're growth mentoring moments. Again, we'll talk about that a little bit later. But I think of where we are now, 28 years later, when we began, I'm just amazed because you are so different than, in a sense, your family of origin, unrecognizable again. And I think I am as well from my siblings. And, we meet with our siblings all the time and we love them to death. But we've come a long way.
Yeah. And I grew up in a family where differences were not respected. We didn't learn as kids growing up the seven of us didn't know how to navigate our differences. And so there was a lot of fighting, conflict, hurtful words. And so I came into adulthood and leadership fearing disagreement. Because when there was disagreement in my home, kind of, my parents, their tempers would flare, or my father would give my mother the silent treatment, or there'd be yelling. And so I saw differences as threatening. And so a big part of my leadership growth was I don't have to be afraid of differences, and that differences are good, and we have to learn how to respect them and navigate them.
It's great. And so we realized this is a core discipleship issue, and we'd never gotten discipled in it. In our leadership development all those years, no one ever mentored us in how to do conflict and tensions. And so we taught scripture. I preached sermons on resolving conflicts from the Bible, Matthew 18:15, etc. But no one actually helped us how to do it.
Right.
And so we resolved once we got into this journey, we needed to disciple people and our leaders on how to do a clean fight. And so in some ways, every one of us in leadership and all of you listening, regardless of whether you're in the marketplace or a church or in a family, we reparent people on how to do conflict because people come into our teams, into our churches, into our communities, into our workplaces, and they do conflict the way their families of origin did it.
Everybody.
And so unless there's leadership and mentoring and discipling, that's not going to change. That's why we have people who do conflict, who are in the church 20, 30, 40 years, and they do conflict like they're 10 years old.
And this is not the first skill we teach, right? We don't just say, okay, let's sit down, let me teach you this. I want to emphasize how foundational the previous skills are to get to this one. This one will be much easier. It'll be almost natural.
It's true.
If you have done the previous
skills.
Ones, especially like explore the iceberg, because you have to know what's going on inside of you, and incarnational listening.
It's true.
I don't know if we mentioned it last week or two podcasts ago, but listening can solve 75% of a conflict. Like just listening many times resolves the difference. Listening, getting in the other person's shoes, getting in each other's shoes and listening and feeling felt. But so if you have that, and Pete and I, we practice those for a long time and internalized them. And
it made this much more doable.
Yes.
So again, I want to give that commercial. You want to go to whether it's Christian books or Amazon or our website at emotionallyhealthy.org/store. Pick up the Emotionally Healthy Relationships course. Begin to work through the videos are going to show you. You'll see models, the workbook, the day-by-day book. Get that participants packet and begin to work through the course. I promise you, life-changing. Again, the videos are free once you get that workbook and stuff. So Jerry, let's do a clean fight right now. Let's model it. And why don't we model an old one we used to model years ago about the cell phone? And then we'll teach them the skill briefly, and then we'll go into leadership applications. All right. How's that sound?
Sure. Yeah, that's fine. I just got to refresh my...
Get your brain around me coming in the house, talking on the cell phone.
Right.
We can't do the whole skill. So we got to do an abbreviated version here.
Right. And so, again, this issue that I'm going to share with Pete, I had done with him in incarnational listening, and it resolved a lot. But incarnational listening doesn't always resolve something. It always doesn't bring closure to something. And that's why there's a kind of this next step in the clean fight that actually has you asking for something very specific. In incarnational listening, you're being sought to be felt, to be understood. But in clean fight, you're actually making a request for a behavior change. So, okay. So, Pete, would you be willing to do a clean fight with me?
Absolutely, honey.
Okay. So, honey, I notice that most of the time that you arrive home from work, long day at church or whatever, you would come in our front door still talking on the phone.
Okay. So you've observed that when I often come home from wherever I'm at, work, church, that I'm on the phone talking as I walk in the house.
Yes. And this issue is important to me because I value a boundary between work and home.
Okay. And the reason this is so important to you is because of your value of a separation between work and home.
Yes, that like when you're at work, you're present there.
Yeah.
Yeah. But when you're home, you're present here.
Got it. When I'm at work, I'm working, present there. When I'm home, I walk in that door, I'm with you and our family, I'm present.
Yes. And when you walk in the phone, when you walk in the house and you're still on the phone and it's an extension, it's like just you're still working. But there's this sort of crazy making in my mind going on because he's home, but he's not home.
Okay. So when I walk in talking to someone else, it's crazy making to you because I'm really not home yet, but I'm home physically, but I'm not really there emotionally. Right.
And so when that happens, I feel taken for granted.
Okay. So when that happens, you feel taken for granted.
I feel a distant second to your work.
You feel a distant second to work.
Right. I mean, initially I feel angry. I didn't say that, but really underneath that is it's hurt. It's hurt. I feel hurt when that happens because I value the boundary of and the value of presence and our connection when you come home.
Okay. So how do you feel hurt? Because you so value our connection when I come home.
Yeah. And yes. So, okay. So what I'd like to, my request is that you, before you pull in the driveway to our house, maybe even before you turn the corner down our block, that you'd actually finish your any conversation that is still work related. That's what I would like to ask. Before you, as you turn the block, as you turn the block, that you'd be finished a conversation from church. Not even because there's been many times where I've seen you sitting outside, still on the phone in front of our house.
Yes. So your request is that before I turn onto 215th place, I would finish my phone call.
Yeah.
And so that when I get into that driveway, I'm not on the phone. I'm here.
Yeah. And so that also gives you time to emotionally, make that transition from wherever your presence has been to now presence at home.
Okay. So I make the transition. So for your sake, that I make the transition from work to home, being present here, not there with other people.
Amen.
And amen. Okay, good.
Okay.
All right. Thank you.
So now you're going to consider the request?
So now the way the skill works, okay, as a listener, I consider it. Honey, I really appreciate that. As you know, my dad was never present. He was he had a cell phone in his day, but he worked as he came in the door and he sat down at work and like we weren't even there. Mm-hmm. So it's in my bones for sure. And but I really appreciate that it's important to you. So I would like to try it. I want to do it. So yes, I can do it. However, I'd like to ask that if I forget or I don't do it right away, mm-hmm. I'm in the driveway talking to someone, sitting in the car, or even I forget and I walk in the door, mm-hmm. I would just ask that you wouldn't give me your wrath or anger, but you might say, "Hey, honey, give me a little bit of grace to get started," because this is a gigantic change for me, mm-hmm. my whole life. Mm-hmm. Again, Grandpa's in my bones, Jesus mm-hmm. in my heart, but I love you and I want you to feel loved by me, not just know it intellectually. So I'd like to do it, but I know myself well enough to know that this may be a bit of a journey for me. So would you be willing to give me some grace and maybe...
Yeah. So what would be helpful for me to say if you forget and you walk in the house? Like what would be a gentle reminder for you?
Honey, and just go like this with the phone. Okay. Phone. And I'll be, got it.
All right.
And even if I'm on the driveway and I walk in, just go, honey, that's it, because I know you saw me. It's good. Okay. Versus I'm hiding.
I'm knocking on the window of the car.
Just, be gracious. Give me some room to grow. But I really want to do it, honey.
Okay. So your request, your
amendment.
Your amendment that you're asking for is that if it happens, I would give you a gentle reminder by just going, honey.
Yeah.
Okay.
Good.
I can do that.
Great. All right, honey, we're set. Great. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right. So that gave you a little sample. So the skill goes like this. It's actually the skill we spent some years, and Geri in particular, years trying to make it simple, succinct and simple, even though it's difficult to do in the moment. And so it begins with the speaker stating the problem. I notice. Mm-hmm. We give sentence stems. Geri did that. I notice you talk on the phone. Then states why it's important to you. I value this, and then explain why. And then the next sentence then is I feel because. And so she did that as well. And then she stated very clearly, specifically, and respectfully her request. And then I had a chance for the listeners to respond, which I did. We went back and forth.
Right. Make an amendment.
And
need be. Right. The listener, I'm getting to ask for what I would like. Doesn't mean he's going to automatically do it. So the issue on the speaker, so I'm the one who asked for the clean fight. And one of the most transformational things that I realized about this skill is that the issue is about me. It's not about Pete. He's not a bad person because he walks in the house on the phone. And
because if I was married to somebody else,
right,
maybe they don't care.
That's right. He could be married to someone else who it wouldn't bother them at all if he walked in the house on the phone. But it bothers me. And so that's why the issue is about me. And the reason we emphasize this is because most of the time when we have an issue with somebody, we think they're the issue.
Yes.
And not necessarily. I mean, usually you're the issue because you have a different preference.
Exactly.
There's a difference there, and you're asking for, something that you want.
Yeah. Again, there's a little bit more to the skill, but you get the good gist here of how it functions.
Right.
And so for me, it would apply to something as simple as someone showing up late for a staff meeting, and maybe they came to a different team it didn't matter if they came late. The other leader didn't mind, but for me, it did matter. If we started at 1:00 and the person shows up at 1:10, it really bothered me. And so I got clear about, for me, this is important. It's a value for me. And so I could articulate it. So that principle is really important for you, but for me, and I think as leaders, especially in this, this is in a marriage relationship, very freeing.
To go into the conversation with a clean fight without blaming. I'm not blaming him because I'm recognizing this is about me. All I can say is my whole life, I grew up in a family of 7 kids where you're blaming each other.
Yes.
But now this is so transformational for me because I'm taking responsibility for the issue because I know it's about me. And that is that's a mature adult thing to do. That's an emotionally mature adult thing to do.
Great. All right, hon, let's I got these 4 applications for leadership. Let's go by them one by one. Let's not get crazy. Each one is worth an hour. But first one is this, for leaders, all of us listening, that we model and teach. We want to be models and teachers of what it means to love our enemies, love in difficult conflicts, that this is the mark of mature spirituality. That's a gigantic paradigm shift, that us growing and maturing in this is when Jesus talks about love your enemies, be kind to the ungrateful and the wicked, for God's merciful, all those commandments of loving. This is, and in some ways, that the rubber's hitting the road, and that this is mature spirituality. And for leaders, we model it and we actually teach it to other people.
And when we talk about enemies, there's a spectrum of enemies. And, but for many of us, just anybody who disagrees with us becomes an enemy. So, and that's really what this kind of skill is being applied to, because this skill is not for big, ongoing, long-standing conflicts where, people are about to get divorced or churches are going to split, or this is a stepping stone skill to just even begin to learn to take responsibility for an issue yourself and respect differences.
Yeah.
So when we talk, it is though, that's huge.
It's gigantic.
Respecting differences is a huge step towards loving your enemy.
So when we are working with leaders and discipling folks, we know that mature spirituality, maturity in Jesus, this is a core marker for that. And that's why this is so critically important that we begin to disciple and train leaders and people that we're discipling in this skill. So that's number one. And again, I look at it as an application of Jesus, with the Pharisees and Sadducees, who didn't care about loving their enemies and being merciful. They just wanted to be into love with Jesus. And I meet lots of folks today, leaders, pastors. Yeah, I'm growing and loving Jesus, but my relationships, I got a lot of unresolved stuff going on here. And for me, this skill and this kind of stuff we're talking about here is bridging that gap, that we actually are like Jesus and making love central to our marker.
You now have a tool to know how to approach someone where you're experiencing, differences.
That's great. Okay. Second leadership application is that conflict is a place of revelation and transformation, both for us and those we're leading. And I'll give you a biblical text for it, because it's such a wonderful text out of Genesis 32, 22 and following, when Jacob and Esau are in the middle of a big conflict. Jacob is moving towards Esau. It's 25 years of broken relationship, and God comes to him. And he meets the living God. He meets the living Jesus. His hip is dislocated, but he has an encounter with God. And in the same way, we can speak from experience, both personally and working with other people. Conflict is a place of revelation. We meet God in all new ways, and it's a place of deep transformation for us and everybody we lead. So it's holy ground. It's holy ground. So why don't we mention a couple of things like...
Right. There's a lot of revelation personally when you're, in conflict, because you're forced, again, if you've been going through these skills progressively, then you're forced to do some inner work of what's going on inside of you. What am I thinking? What am I feeling? Where are my faulty assumptions? What does my reaction teach me about me? There's a lot of revelation.
There is. One grows in differentiation. Mm-hmm. Who am I? Who am I not? How's God uniquely made me?
Yes.
We grow in things like, disrupting false peace. We realized that, so much of our work is about integrity, that we're actually living what we're preaching, that we're not living a false peace, but we're actually living in true kingdom peace. And I get Jesus came alive, I know for me, of realizing, oh my gosh, Jesus dealt with so much tension and conflict.
I know, but then why do we only see blessed are the peacemakers?
we misinterpret that verse, because if you read the Beatitudes, right after blessed are the peacemakers, he goes, blessed are those who are persecuted because of righteousness, when people revile you. And remember, Jesus said, I came to bring not peace, but a sword, division. And we see Jesus, I mean, for me, scripture got opened up about, oh, wow, Jesus had so much conflict, but he disrupted false peace for true peace. And so it's such a place of revelation. I made a list here as I was preparing, honey boy, you were getting ready to come upstairs, of like, my goodness, some of my worst, most painful conflicts, and I've listed 3 of them over my many years of leading, were such places of transformation for me. I had to wrestle with hatred, bitterness, my motives. I'm talking about conflicts that didn't get resolved for a long time. But yet I wouldn't trade them for anything. They were dark nights, but they were seasons where I grew to understand the crucifixion in ways that I never understood it before. Scripture opened up to me, especially with Jesus going to the cross, being misunderstood, and learning to forgive as I've been forgiven. It put feet on so much that would have just been head knowledge for me.
And even recently, I've seen you using this skill to lead out of your integrity. Like, something has not been right over here or over there.
Yes.
And you're speaking into that situation or that person's life by saying, hey, this value is important to me, and and you're making a request. But that takes differentiation, maturity.
I did it twice this past week with 2 people. That it was important. It wasn't, they were we'll call it clean fighting light. It was light, but it was enough it needed to be done.
It took differentiation.
And it was great for them, especially. It was wonderful. Our third application is that really difficult conflicts are in the present are rooted in the past. And that it's important to remember that we have a genogram, we have triggers and vulnerabilities based on our histories around conflict, anger, etc. And so do the other people. And so that is a gigantic leadership truth, not just for ourselves, but then people we're leading, as we're helping them learn to do clean fighting versus dirty fighting. And we're training them. So that's why, again, genogram obviously is so important.
And that's why there's the work involved to sort out, am I being triggered here? Or is there a value of mine that's been violated? I mean, There's a lot of inner work that, thought, reflection that has to take place.
So I had somebody just yesterday who works for me. So now they have power differential. I'm double their age. I'm older. They work for me. They're younger, different culture. His culture is honor culture, honor shame culture. So tremendous respect for authority. And he came to me with very respectfully, basically saying no to some things I was asking him to do. And it was incredibly courageous for him to do that. It was like, and I know his history, and I know he loves me, but I know what it took for him, the amount of time and energy to write that email. Well, he talked to me about it first, and he wrote the email. It was very beautiful. And I was so happy, and I was able to enter his world because I know his triggers, I know his genogram. And then of course I was aware of my own power as a person older than him. And we had a great conversation, but it was an example of a negotiation that was very life-giving. We didn't solve it all today in our 1-hour meeting, but it was just a great meeting. But I was aware of my genogram, his genogram, our histories, our triggers, and it was beautiful.
Yeah. And you have done enough work yourself that the power differential, you don't lord it over people at all.
Yeah.
You respect, you respect authority, you respect people under you. And so, people can come to you that you supervise and speak truth to you. And then that's work that you've had to do, because many times power over doesn't receive and doesn't allow that to happen.
That's true. All right, honey. And last application is that not every conflict gets resolved this side of heaven. Mm-hmm. And that is a important truth, leadership truth to remember, painful one. But I don't know what to say about it, but it's true.
Well, I mean,
partially resolved, or
I mean, you can only do in as much as your part can do, and sometimes it could take years. Again, this is meant for smaller things, because people haven't even practiced how to navigate differences in smaller things. But yes, again, there's a spectrum of what conflict looks like. But this is a
tremendous tool,
beginning tool.
So let's encourage you again. As we conclude this kind of a series on the emotionally healthy relationships.
Yes.
Please get that emotionally healthy relationships participants pack. Again, whether it's our website, Amazon, Christian book, or you want to download 2 sessions for free and get a taste of what this relationships course is all about. And go to emotionally.org/preview. We just want to promise you it's life changing. I mean, I just can't imagine where we would be, our leadership, the ministries we've led.
Unimaginable.
It's unimaginable. And it's a secret sauce, to living out.
So did we, in our very first podcast of the skills, talk about getting on the bike? It's like riding a bike. I don't know.
No, go ahead. Why don't you close with that?
Yeah, I do. I mean, the skills for me are very similar to how you learn to ride a bike. And you can only learn to ride a bike by getting on it and riding it. So you can't learn to ride a bike by reading about it in a book, by watching a bunch of slides, by somebody getting up there and modeling how to ride a bike. You're still not going to know how to ride a bike until you get on it. So the temptation might be with these skills that you just open the workbook and you kind of read through it. It's an intellectual thing. This is not an intellectual thing. These skills must be experienced in order for you to internalize them. So we want to encourage you to get on the bike, get a partner, and do each skill and practice. You start out with training wheels on the bike. And that's what those beginning skills are. They're training wheels for learning how to love your neighbor and love yourself and love God. And then as you progress, we take the training wheels off, and hopefully you'll be flying down the street sort of by the end. But it's practice, practice, practice. And so I mean, there's no substitute for practice. I mean, CTR, Pete and I practiced probably for several months, even while we still learn. We'd learn the new skill, but we'd learn the second skill, but still practicing the first skill. Because
the goal is you won't need the training wheels. Our goal and prayer for you is you will become love. God is love, and our communities will be countercultural, radical places of the love of Jesus, for the sake of long-term mission in the world. We'll be a gift to the world, but it's got to start with us, our teams, our ministries we lead. But this is the hard work of discipleship, deep transformation. But friends, all we can tell you is it's a wonderful way to live. It's tremendous on multiple levels. Yeah. And by God's grace, you will have a greater experience of the love of God for yourself and the glory of God as well. So thank you so much. It's been great to be with you. Honey, thank you.
And we want to give us a special shout out to, to Lynette and Terrence. We met Lynette and Terrence last Sunday, and they are a couple that in the last couple of years have discovered the skills and have begun to internalize it themselves in their marriage, bringing it to their 6 children, to their extended family, to the in-laws.
And they're leaders in their church as well.
And they're leaders in their
church.
Doing
the course, they're table leaders.
I mean, we were just thrilled at how they have taken to the skills and learning them, practicing them, and then using them. And they're seeing big changes in their family. And so, again, to all the Lynette and Terrences out there, we want to say Go for it. We are cheering you on. And you can change not only yourself, your marriage, your church, the church culture, but generations.
Amen and amen. Thank you, everybody. Great to be with you. Have a wonderful day.
Thank you.